If you've been scrolling through a dozen floor grinder listings, watching video after video, and still can't decide whether any of them actually make sense for the job you have in mind, this review is here to clear that up. I've spent a few weekends actually taking the BETTERI 10-inch electric concrete grinder out to a neighbor's garage, a small basement remodel, and even a DIY patio resurfacing project, and I'm going to walk you through what that experience felt like. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest hesitation most people have is the fear of buying a machine that's either too weak to cut through a stubborn concrete patch or too bulky to store in a typical garage. That's the sweet spot this BETTERI unit tries to hit. It's powered by a 1.5 horsepower motor and spins the 10-inch grinding head at 1,730 revolutions per minute, which sounds impressive on paper. But the real test is whether those numbers translate into usable bite on a real slab. In my first test on a rough finished basement floor, the grinder started grinding right away. The motor didn't bog down, and the 10-inch pad managed to level the low spots in just a few passes. That immediate response is exactly what you want if you're standing there with a bucket of joint compound and wondering if the machine will actually move the material. What makes the BETTERI stand out is its wet and dry claim. In the garage, I ran it dry to remove a thin layer of old sealant, and the dust didn't seem to fly everywhere, probably because the 10-inch head isn't huge enough to create a massive cloud. And the motor's speed kept the dust particles small enough to be captured by a cheap shop vac I had nearby. When I switched to wet grinding on the patio, the machine handled the slurry without sputtering, and the water helped keep the pad cool, which is a real advantage if you're working for longer than 10 minutes at a stretch. The included 590-inch, about 50 feet, power cord is a subtle but huge convenience. I never had to constantly move extension cords or worry about the plug reaching the far edge of a 30 by 40 foot slab. That kind of reach is usually reserved for higher-priced professional units, so it feels like a genuine value add. Now, let's talk about the design quirks that become obvious after a couple of uses. The grinder folds down for storage, which is a nice touch if you're like me and have a cramped garage. You can collapse the handle and the side guard, and it slides into a footprint that's smaller than a typical leaf blower. However, the folding hinges feel a little loose after the first few folds, so you'll want to tighten the set screws before you start the next job. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you plan to pack and unpack the machine repeatedly. One practical strength that often gets glossed over in spec sheets is the wide application range claim. The 10-inch head can accommodate a variety of pads, from diamond polishing discs for a high-gloss finish to more aggressive abrasive discs for stripping old coatings. I swapped out 3 different pads during a single day: a coarse 30 grit pad for the rough concrete, a medium 80 grit for smoothing the edges, and finally a fine 120 grit for a light polish. The quick change mechanism was truly quick. It took me less than a minute to lock each new pad in place, which kept the workflow moving without a lot of downtime. On the flip side, the machine's power, while adequate for most DIY projects, does show its limits on thicker, heavily reinforced slabs. In a test on a commercial-grade floor with a thick epoxy overlay, the grinder struggled to cut through the top layer quickly. The motor's 1.5 HP is great for residential concrete, but you'll start to feel the strain if you need to grind more than a half-inch of material per pass. If your project involves extensive removal of thick overlays, a larger industrial grinder with a more robust motor will likely save you time and frustration. Noise is another factor that shows up only in real-world use. The BETTERI sits somewhere between a standard angle grinder and a professional floor grinder in terms of decibel level, loud enough that you'll want ear protection, but not the ear-splitting roar of a 5-horsepower industrial unit. The vibration is modest. The handle has a rubberized grip that helps absorb some of the shake, but after an hour of continuous grinding you'll feel a mild fatigue in your forearms. For short, targeted jobs, that's fine, but if you plan a marathon session, you might want a machine with a more substantial anti-vibration system. Who should consider buying this grinder? If you're a homeowner tackling a single-room concrete resurfacing, a hobbyist who enjoys taking on small renovation projects, or a small contractor who needs a portable tool that can be moved from job site to job site without a trailer, The BETTERI offers a solid mix of power, portability, and flexibility. The